Hi everyone, I am TigerHawkT3 and today we're going to look at testing in Django. There's a big section in the tutorial about, this is automated testing in particular. And the first bit it tells us about is why it's important. Automated testing allows you to write code and then just run it through a program or script, and then determining whether it works that way instead of poking through and saying, okay, now I'm going to try adding, an object in the database, and now I'm going to see about it. You just write down all the things you were going to do to test and put them in a script, basically, and save it. And there's some other helpful stuff in this framework. There's a module for testing. So that's what we're going to do. Why you need to create tests. I'm just going to summarize the bullet points. Tests will save you time, because you can see whether something was broken unexpectedly by a change you made in one place. Could affect somewhere else. Seems like a chore, but it will help. They don't just identify problems, they prevent problems. Tests make your code more attractive. Apparently some people will refuse to even look at code that doesn't have tests written for it. Tests help teams work together, so you can make sure everything works together. Basically, they really want you to include testing in your work. Basic strategies, there's something called test-driven development, where you write the test first, and then you write a program that will pass those tests. More often, a newcomer to testing will create some code and later decide that it should have some tests. It's good to make them earlier, but it's never too late to get started. If you have a lot of code already and you decide to start making tests, then write the first test the next time you make a change and go from there. So let's do that right away. It says, let's. First we identify a bug. There's a bug in the polls application. Let's look at that. Where is that? Is that in views? I think it's in here. Possibly. So this bug is that it orders the questions by publication date and takes the 5 most recent ones. But the bug, they say in this, is that if there's a question whose publication date is in the future, it will be included here. I personally don't think that's a bug. The bug is that you have questions being created that are in the future, so that's something to look into instead of just kind of abandoning them. So it tells us to go into the shell. Let me go there and here. Python, my site. I think it's in here. Yeah. Okay, let's turn this on. We're going to start Python. Do we have to do anything else? Wasn't there a run manage and then the shell or something? How did we do that? I have to go back and check, sorry. No. Maybe it's here. Py manage.py and then shell. Okay. That's what we'll do. Very good. Py manage.py shell. Very good. And that should start up shortly, I hope. We're going to import datetime, and we're going to import time zone from Django.utils, and we're going to look in polls. Oops, forgot to say import. Sorry. From polls.models, import question. Okay. Then we're going to create a question instance with the publication date 30 days in the future. This is what they have us do. Can't really see that, huh? I'll have a continuation there, plus this. So we're going to make a future question, and that is a question with the publication date that is now, plus a time delta of 30 days. So it's created a month from right now. And then future question dot was published recently. True. So it was. So it would be included in that. So that's apparently a bug. I don't know if I would consider that a bug. I would be more concerned that someone's creating questions in the future. That is obviously wrong, because that hasn't happened yet. What we've just done in the shell to test for the problem is exactly what we can do in an automated test. So instead of writing out these things over here, we're just going to put that in a script and save it, and then we can do that sort of thing more often. So we're going to go into polls, and that's polls. Oh, we're going to create a new file. Are we? Put the following in the test.py file in the polls application. Let's create that. In polls. So we already have a tests file, and I'm just going to open it here and put it here. So put the following in the file which already exists in the polls application. All right. We have from Django.test import test case already. We want a few other things, and I'm just going to dump it in there, and then we will take a look at it. So we want date time, and we want time zone, and then here's the testing module, and we're going to import the test case class and our question class. Very good. So we have a class for question method tests, and it inherits from test case. Very good. And it has one method, and that's it starts with test. Anything that also any file whose name begins with test is a testing suite, considered as such by Django. And same for this method, it starts with test, so it's going to be included in tests, any tests that it runs. So we're going to, I don't know if I approve of this, because if we had imported time instead of just time zone, then this would override it. I don't know. We're not actually importing it, so it won't cause any problems. But we have our timezone.now plus a delta of 30 days. Delta is the Greek letter delta, and it's generally used to represent change. If you're doing science stuff, you might measure a temperature delta or pressure delta. It means a change. So time delta is a change in time. And we have our question that we create with this publication date. And then we assert is, and self is a question method tests object which inherits from this, which has this class has a method called assert is. Now the assert statement in Python is used for testing. Basically, you give that statement an expression, and if it's true, it's fine. But if it produces something unexpected, like if you do assert 3 = 2, it will raise an assertion error. So it basically makes your program crash if it fails a test. And then you would run that, and you would see the assertion error, and it said was supposed to be this, but then I actually evaluated that expression, and it was incorrect. So assert is, and this is supposed to be false, we're hoping. But we know already that it isn't false. It is true, as we could see here. It is true. So that's this test will fail for now, which ought to be false, the tutorial says. In the terminal, we can run our test. Let me actually save this first. Let me exit this. So I exited the interactive session, and now I will run the test. So python manage.py, and we're going to tell this to run the test on the polls application. And when it actually runs, it will create a test database, which means a pretend one, basically, a sandbox. And it says we failed a test. And here's a trace back, because assertions raise an error. And that's assertion error is the class of error that they raise. True is not false, which is what we wanted to get, and here's what we actually got. So, failed. Failures equals 1. And here's an important part, destroying the test database. That's pretty good. What happened is this. It looked for tests in the polls application, and it found a subclass of the Django.test.testCase class. The Django.test.testCase class. It found a subclass of this, which is this that we created. Created a special database. Here's the creating test database. Looked for test methods, and that's methods whose names begin with test, and this does begin with test over here. In this method, it created the time and the question with the question that was in the future, a question that had a future publication date. And using the assert is method, we discovered that it returns true, but we were hoping for false. So now we have to fix it. And when it found this, it raised an error, and our program crashed, basically. Now, keep in mind, assertions can be turned off. You can run a program with, like, ignoring all assert things and statements. So do not use assertions to do things in your code that you're relying on. They're only for testing. Like if you have, instead of an if, you might do or if you have an input and you're hoping for a number, you might try int user input and then accept a value error. You could do instead you could assert that user input dot is digit or something, and then if it isn't all digits, it would crash. And you can try that and then accept an assertion error or something, but you can run your code by and ignore assertions, so that assert will never happen. Don't use it for your program's actual algorithm, only for testing. Okay, fixing the bug. We know what the problem is. Change the method in models.py so it only returns true if the date is also in the past. In models, okay, it was published recently. It's if this question's publication date is after 1 day ago. So we want it to be after 1 day ago, but before right now. And we already are referring to right now, so what we're going to do is save it. Now, okay, so now the self.publication date has to be sometime between right now and yesterday, as opposed to just after yesterday. So that should resolve it. Let's run it again. There we go. So now we retest. Okay. That's it. Now we pass. Great. Many other things might go wrong with our application in the future, but we can be sure that we won't inadvertently reintroduce this bug, because when we run this test, it will check for that. And that's it. As long as we include things in this test, we will keep on checking for it. We can consider this little portion of the application pinned down safely forever. Hopefully. More comprehensive tests. We want to make sure that fixing this bug doesn't introduce another, so we're going to add more test methods to the same test class to check a little more thoroughly. So here's what we'll do. Future, old, recent. So now we're going to add more stuff. Okay, so we're going to test that something was published recently with an old question. Was published recently should return false for questions that are older than a day. Yeah. Oops, gotta put this over here. So we're doing this whole thing, timezone.now. So this is a month ago. So this is a month in the future. This is a month prior. And now we're going to make a question with that publication date and say that it should not be published recently. And we also have a test that was published recently for an actual recent question, and this one should be true. Should return true for questions whose pub date is within the last day. So we save a time of an hour ago. We make a question with the publication date of 1 hour ago, and then we assert that was published recently. That method in models. Where are we? Is it this one? Yes. Was published recently should return true for that one. So if this is saying we're going to make our test suite will create a question published a month in the future and say this should not count as was published recently. Should not count, should be false. And then we're going to create a question with the publication date a month in the past and say this shouldn't count as a recent question also. Either, I mean. And then we're going to create a question with the publication date of just an hour ago and say this should count as was published recently. Great. The tutorial emphasizes that polls is a simple application, but however complex it grows in the future and whatever other code it interacts with, we now have some guarantee that the method we have written tests for will behave in expected ways. So this is basically making sure we don't break it. Let's see this, and let's see if we pass all our tests. Ran 3 tests. Okay. Cool. Very good. Now we're going to test a view. The polls application is fairly undiscriminating. It will publish any question, including ones whose pub date field lies in the future. We should improve this. Yes, we should. Setting a pub date in the future should mean that the question is published at that moment, but invisible until then. So now we're going to test a view. Oh, there's someone in chat. GhostScript says it's TigerHawk D3 time. It certainly is. And we're doing Django stuff, testing. Automated testing. It's unglamorous, but it's important so that we can make sure we don't break anything. Because broken code is not glamorous either. When we fixed the bug above, we wrote the test and then the code to fix it, and that's test-driven development. So that was an internal thing, but now we want to test a user-facing thing, something that the user would do in the browser. Let's look at some tools we have. Django has a test client to simulate a user interacting with the code at the view level. That's cool. We can use it in test.py or even in the shell. We will start again with the shell. We're going to do a couple things. Okay. Let's turn on this. Go there. Do this. Manage shell. Okay. The first is to set up the test environment in the shell. I'm gonna do some copy pasting. That's fine. As long as you're not copy pasting from one part of your code to another, and it's just from a tutorial into the interpreter, that's fine. And we're going to run this function that we imported, and that's setup test environment. Alright. This installs a template renderer, which will allow us to examine some additional attributes on responses, such as response.context, that otherwise wouldn't be available. This method does not set up a test database, so the following will be run against the existing database, and the output may differ slightly depending on what questions you already created. You might get unexpected results if your time zone in settings.py is incorrect. If you don't remember setting it earlier, check it before continuing. We did change it to, where is that supposed to be? that in views? Settings. Settings.py. Time zone, America / Los Angeles. Beautiful. Next we need to import the test client class. Later in test.py we will use Django.test.testCase, which comes with its own client. Okay, that's cool. But for now we do this. And then we do client equals client. We create one. Cool. With that ready, we can ask the client to do some work for us. Okay, first we're going to do response equals client.get/. I think this will go to the main page of the website and not the polls application, which remember we didn't create yet. It doesn't exist. We have to go to /polls to get anything. So this wasn't found. Good. We do expect a 404. And response dot status code is 404. Very good. But how about polls? We should expect to find something at /polls. Good. We'll use the reverse function that we used before instead of a hard-coded URL. And we're going to import that first. And then we will do this, and no error, instead of not found with a slash. Let's look at the response.status code. It is 200. That is a success. Response.content. Okay, over here the tutorial just says to enter response.content at the shell. The interactive interpreter, when a value is returned to the caller, the top level, without going anywhere else, that value's repro is used. Hello, back to there. So it's returning it to the top level, so it's returning the string we would need to enter to reproduce this. But if we say print, it will return the string representation, in which \t is interpreted as a tab. And notice there are also no enclosing quotes, because if we want to get this string, we do have to enter the closing quotes. And that's what we did to get it. This is exactly the same as that. But when we do print, it gives us the nice string representation. So I'm going to do print response.content. That's weird. Oh, it's bytes. I see. Dot encode UTF-8. Is it encode or decode? Decode? Yes. Awesome. So we have a new line, and we have an unordered list, and then new line, and then spaces, new line, spaces, list item, then we have all this stuff, etc. What's new? And this ampersand hash symbol 39 semicolon. 39 is the character code for the apostrophe. That's what it is. Note this isn't the same as URL encoding. If you have an apostrophe or a single quote in a URL, that would be %27. But the HTML character entity is 39. So ampersand hash symbol 39 and then semicolon. You might have seen for URLs %20 is a space. It's pretty common. And And for HTML encoding, you may have seen an ampersand and then AMP and then a semicolon. That's how you get an ampersand. So that's always fun. So when we just printed, it's a bytes object, so that doesn't have a very nice string representation. So we decode it into a UTF-8 string, and there we go. Beautiful. If this doesn't work, you probably had that. Okay. And now let's get the response.context with latest question list. Response.context, and we want to retrieve latest question list. And that's the query set with a single question of what's new. And it thinks I've changed that to what's up, because it told me to change it to what's up a while ago, and I didn't want to. But that's fine. Oh, Random Stranger is in chat. Hey, how's it going? We're doing testing, which is not super exciting, but important. So we're going to improve our view, because the list of polls shows ones that aren't published yet. Oh, I see. A question with the publication date that's in the future means we've added it to the database, but don't want it to show up yet. So that's kind of preloading questions instead of having to add it to the database and publish it immediately. We'll be able to add questions and say that it only shows up at a certain time. Like if there's a sporting event and you want to add have a poll about whether you're happy with the result, you could say, what did you think of the game? And you could have it be published only when the game is scheduled to be done, so that it's not while the game's going on and someone goes to your poll and says, what did you think of the game that just happened? It's still happening. I don't know why you're asking, right? So that's what this will do. We're going to go to polls, views, views.py, very good. In tutorial 4, we introduced a class-based view based on the list view, and that's the index view. Yes, very good. We need to amend the getQuerySet method. So order by pub date to 5. We only want the last published questions. It has to check the date by comparing it with timezone.now. Okay. So this is just a basic query to the database, and it's gonna get the last 5. We don't quite want that. I'm going to import timezone. Django.utils, import timezone. Very good. And now we're going to change getQuerySet. We're going to filter instead. Instead of getting all the objects and ordering them by something, we're going to say filter that pubdate LTE, and this means less than or equal. I guess this is some kind of automatically generated attribute or something. It's a little weird, but okay. Pubdate LTE equals timezone.now. And then we're going to do dot order by dash pubdate and get the last 5. Okay. So we just so this is not an instead of order by, we're just filtering first. And I'll do this. Okay. So first we're going to filter for only the questions that are less than or equal to right now. I mean, not the questions with a publication date that's less than or equal to right now. And less than, in terms of time, means anything that's before right now, or actually happening right now, less than or equal. So that'll first basically remove all the questions that are that have a future publication date, and then it will order those by publication date, and then only get the first 5. Great. Okay. Testing our new view. You can test this by starting up the server with manage.py run server, and then you go to the site in the browser and you create questions with dates in the past and future and check that only those that have been published are listed. But you don't want to do that every single time, right? Every time you make a change that might affect this, if you do anything with publication dates. This is something that you would have to test to make sure you didn't break it. So let's create a test with it, and it will happen automatically. We're going to add the following to polls/tests.py. That's over here. We want to import reverse from Django.urls, import reverse. And that's so we don't have to hard code any URLs. We'll create a shortcut function to create questions as well as a new test class. Okay. And this is, I guess, outside of our question method tests. So this is basically a helper function to create a question. And it takes a question text and the number of days. Creates a question with the given question text and published. Creates a question with given question text. Creates a question that has the given question text and was published the given number of days offset to now. Negative offset for the past and positive for in the future, because we're just getting the given number of days, because we're doing right now plus a time delta. So it'll be right now plus, say, 3 days, and if we add negative 3 days, then it'll go 3 days into the past. Much cheaper than a DeLorean. Now we're going to have a new class with a whole pile of, wow, lots of stuff. Okay, I'm not going to type all that. I'm going to copy it and then paste it. That's fine, because goodness gracious. So over here, look at how much there is. Jeez. All this stuff. Question view tests. That's a lot of testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 methods. Let's look at some of these. Let's do that. So we have a method that starts with test for all of them. There's test, and there's test, and there's test. So it starts with test, and that means that when we run the test thing, that's what's going to happen. Okay. First is a shortcut for the create question, yes, to take some repetition out of the process of creating questions, and that'll just create a question created at the given time with the publication date of the given time. It's not when the question's created, it's when we want it published. test index view with no questions. So we have a response that is self.client.get, and it will go to polls index, okay. And then it will assert that the response status code is 200, means it's successful. So it's going to go to polls index, make sure that works, and then assert that the response means that the response has no polls are available. That's if it's empty, if there's no questions. If no questions exist, an appropriate message should be displayed. Yeah. And then it's going to say that the query set is nothing. Assert query set equal. So it's going to get this query set for the latest question list, and it should be an empty list, because this is an index view with no questions. Okay. Assert equal. All right. So this doesn't create questions. It checks that message, checks that it's empty. In test index view with a past question, we first create a question that has a text saying it's in the past, and the days, that's here, this is our create question function up here, is going to be -30, so it's 30 days in the past. And then we're going to get a client response, and then we're going to say that this query set is equal to, and the response context is going to have a list that says question of past question. That's what it should have. Test index view with a future question. So nowadays is +30. We get a response from the client. Should say no polls are available, because the publication date is in the future. Doesn't have it yet. And the question list should be empty. Future question and past question. Even if both past and future questions exist, only the past ones should be displayed. So now it's going to create a past question with -30, so 30 days in the past, 30 days in the future, and when we go to the site, the query set should only have the past question. Two past questions. So we're going to make a question published 30 days ago and one published 5 days ago, because it's -5 and -30. And then we're going to do the same thing. Response is this, and we're going to assert that it's equal to past question 2 and past question 1, because it's sorted by most recent, I guess. Great. That's all we have. Very good. And so on. We're using the test to tell a story of admin input and user experience on the site, and checking that at every state and for every new change in the state of the system, the expected results are published. Good. What we have works well, but although future questions don't appear in the index, users can still reach them if they know or guess the right URL. That's absolutely right. So we need to add a similar constraint to detail view. Remember how, was it last time or the time before? Oh, Katie Clark is in chat. Hello. Katie asks, what's the difference between developer and programmer and tester? Developer and programmer are reasonably interchangeable. Developer might be making design decisions about code. Kind of a catch-all thing, a catch-all term. Programmer is not necessarily designing software. They may have just been told to implement a particular function or feature. The difference is a little fuzzy, largely in for the title that you want to have. Software developer sounds fancier than programmer. Programmer gives the impression that all you're doing is literally just coding whatever you're supposed to code. Note that that's also different from computer scientist. Computer scientists may not be actually writing applications. They might be just writing code to help others write code. For example, Tim Peters, who created the sorting method, the sorting algorithm that's used in the standard distribution of Python. This algorithm is called timsort for some reason. It's very fast, it's stable, it's quite excellent. It uses features from various kinds of sorting algorithms. It's really cool. That's computer science. So he's not exactly writing an app for, you know, calling a taxi from your phone or whatever, but he's helping other people program. Computer science. The science of writing logic for computers. And tester 2. Testing is a separate category, really. Some software testers don't necessarily write code. They might just sit down with a supposedly finished program or whatever build, and they try to break it. The best testers will be able to break a program in many fascinating ways. Like you think you've written a nice web browser, but it turns out that if you press Control-Shift F5 and then F12 a bunch of times, it breaks for some reason, and then you have to find out why. That's testing. It is not considered a very glamorous position, but it's very important. Just like testing itself, which is why it's, I mean, we're not really adding features or functionality to our app, but we're making sure that we don't break it, because a broken app doesn't look good. Let's see. Testing the detail view. So remember the last segment of Django, we went to the polls app, and we could get a list. First, when we made it with like placeholder stuff, it was you can go to polls/1 and get, this is, you are seeing the detail for question number 1. It just returned a string with whatever. So you could give it 1 or 30, etc. Anything. It would just give you a question that says it's this question number. And then we changed the list view to actually kind of list out the questions nicely, and that worked great. And you could click on a question and get there, but you could still go to questions that didn't quite exist yet. Let's see if we can go there. Views. Let's save this actually. It's taken a little while. That's okay. It just has to, it's hard drive access, whatever. Vote. Where's the is it the view, index view, detail view? Oh, the template. Yes. Polls detail. So this just goes through the question. The question and for choice and question.choice set all. Yes, and it just lets us pick a question, I guess. So we started by just being able to directly go to any question, and then we added our list view to give a nice list, and then we added, oh yes, if we go to a question that shouldn't exist yet, we get a 404. And now if a question exists but has a publication date in the future that technically would work, but we don't want users to see it yet, we will check that first. So we're going to go to views, and we're going to go to our detail view. Okay. And we're going to modify its get query set. Query set. Let's do this. And then excludes any questions that aren't published yet. And we're going to have return question.objects.filter pub date, put pub with a B, less than or equal. This is pretty similar to this. We're going to filter out, we're going to put a filter on it so that we only get the ones that are now or earlier, because we don't want the ones in the future. Equals time zone dot now. Okay, and we don't need to order them. That's fine. We're just going to return that. Very good. And of course, we're going to add a bunch of tests. Of course. Question view tests, question method tests, and now we want question index detail tests. Great. I'm going to dump those in there. So we're going to test the detail view. Notice how it starts with test, and it inherits from test case. So this has test detail view with a future question, and this has one with a past question. Detail view of a question with the pub date in the future should return a 404 not found. So this creates a question that's 5 days in the future, and then creates the URL, pulls detail with an argument of the future question ID, so we don't have to hard code anything. And then we're going to test that to get a response, and we're going to make sure that our response.status code is equal to 404. And then we have a past question, and this should work. We're going to do a similar thing. Past question equals this, days equals -5. The URL is going to be polls/detail slash, is that an argument? No, it's just going to be polls/detail/ something. Then it's going to use the ID for that, so it's going to go there, go to the site with this URL, and then assert that the response contains the question text. So it's going to make sure that it's there. The rest of the tutorial for this section is ideas for more tests, when testing more is better, and further testing, and then what's next. So we are going to actually try this out. We're going to run this test, because of course we are. So let me show you what's up, and then we're going to test. Ran 10 tests. Okay, fantastic. Let's do a human test. Let's see what's up. PyManage.py run server. Now that's running. Okay, 127.001 port 8000. And now give me a moment, and I will get this set up. Gonna need this. Okay. Alrighty. Great. Okay. Now let's go to 127.001 8000. And this should produce a 404 because we don't have an index. Don't have an index. Correct. Good. Then we go to polls. That should work. We have our what's new question. Let's go to 3. Not found. Very good. No question found matching the query. Excellent. How about 1? We found 1. Let's vote again for the sky. Now we have 5 and 3. Cool. That's fantastic. How about question 2's results? Not found, because we're supposed to not find it, because it doesn't exist. All right. So now we've got that, and I can stop the server. Okay. Ideas for more tests. We ought to add a similar getQuerySet method to results view and create a new test class for that view. It'll be very similar to what we've just created. In fact, there will be a lot of repetition. It's silly that questions can be published on the site that have no choices, so our views should check that a question has choices to pick. Our test would create a question without choices and then test that it's not published. Create a similar question with choices and test that it is published. Maybe logged in admin users should be allowed to see unpublished questions, but not ordinary visitors. That's a little vague. Kind of implies that admin users should be able to see unpublished questions, but admin users should not be allowed to see ordinary visitors. That's not what they meant. Not vague, it's ambiguous. They should say logged in admin users, but not ordinary visitors, should be able to see unpublished questions. That would make sense. Whatever needs to be added to the software to accomplish this should be accompanied by a test, whether you write the test first and then make the code, or the other way around. At a certain point, you are bound to look at your tests and wonder whether your code is suffering from test bloat, which brings us to when testing, more is better. It might seem like it's growing out of control. It doesn't matter. Let them grow. Really doesn't matter. Because keep in mind that the test is not the program. Of course, if your test takes, 3 weeks to run, and you're running it every build, and you're doing a new build every day, you've got a problem. But that's probably not going to happen. Adding stuff to your test code means that you will have more stuff happening when you test. It doesn't mean that when you run your server, it's going to be a little slower or anything. It's not running those tests. Sometimes you'll need to update tests. Suppose we amend our views so that only questions with choices are published. Our existing tests will fail because it might say, okay, a question was published in the past, so it's showing up, that's good, but what if the question is published in the past but has no choices? Then it will no longer show up. If we change the behavior to do that, then our test would say it should be here, but it's not, so we would have to update those tests. And it would tell us which tests failed, and then we would look at those and be like, oh, it's expecting to see things just because it had an appropriate publication date. But now it also needs to make sure that the question has choices. At worst, you might find that some tests become redundant, but that's not a problem. Redundancy is good. As long as your tests are sensibly arranged, they won't become unmanageable. Good rules of thumb include having a separate test class for each model or view, a separate test method for each set of conditions you want to test, and test method names that describe their function. Descriptive naming is always important. For the testing, there's a lot more you can do. A number of very useful tools at your disposal to achieve some very clever things. You can use an in-browser framework such as Selenium, I've heard of that, never used it, to test the way your HTML actually renders in a browser. Lets you check the behavior of your Django code and also whatever JavaScript is happening. It's quite something to see the test launch a browser and start interacting with your site as if a human being were driving it. Amazing! Django includes live server test case to facilitate integration with tools like Selenium. Fantastic. If you have a complex application, you may want to run tests automatically with every commit for the purposes of continuous integration. That means every change you make is automatically causes a new build to happen and published, at least internally. Instead of I'm going to make all these changes and then say, okay, I'm ready. Now this is, the next version, and I will, send that out to the as a new build. It says everything you do is automatically in the build. Quality control is partially automated. Yes, a good way to spot untested parts of your application is to check code coverage. If you can't test a piece of code, it usually means that code should be refactored or removed. Coverage will help to identify dead code. For full details on testing, see Testing in Django. And there's a topic in the help. That's great. But you know what? Testing is unglamorous and it is boring, so I'm not gonna write a ton more stuff and bloat the test thing, even though it's okay, because I would like to do cool stuff. Sorry to say, Django testing page, but I made what it showed me how to make. But I'm not super comfortable with all the database queries yet. So questions with no choices. I don't really know how to check for that. Views, URLs, settings, models. Choice text. Okay. Oh, this is for the admin, I guess. This was something we did, wasn't it? We typed stuff in, and things happened, added things to the database. So somewhere in here, admin? No, not really anything here. Register question. Yeah, I don't quite know where that would be. It's somewhere, maybe in the models, I guess. Care field, date time field, question text. It's probably somewhere around here, but I don't remember how to look at a question's choices, how to validate that when that happens. And a question must have choices or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll look into that later, maybe. But perhaps as I learn more about this and become more comfortable, I will want to write more tests. So that's great. Useful, I suppose. Random stranger asks, what's buffer in Python? Buffer as a generic programming concept, not just programming, but anything really, is basically some leeway between what you are doing and what you will be doing. A buffer is just something that happens between two other concepts. It's a very broad idea, used in everything from trains to programming. For example, a train might have something on the front, like a bumper, just kind of to stop it from running into other trains, a buffer. You can have buffers, I think, in chemistry, where it's just, I think, like an inert chemical or something. I don't know where I'm pulling this stuff. Chemistry buffer. I know it's a thing. What is it? A buffer is a solution that can resist pH change upon the addition of an acidic or basic components. It is able to neutralize small amounts of added acid or base, thus maintaining the pH of the solution relatively stable. I don't know if that's quite the same thing, but that's one kind of buffer. There's also a buffer in computing, which is generally some way of storing data of some kind that can be retrieved quickly. So you might have something that is that retrieves data pretty slowly. For example, downloading something from the internet, and then if you're looking at a page just of text on the internet, then it'll retrieve it, and as fast as it can, it will just display everything, or a picture. But if you're watching a video, for example, you don't just want to watch the whole thing at once, but you also don't want it to get the next, byte or frame that it show you, and show you that frame, and then, okay, we're done watching that frame for this 30th of a second. Let's go and request the next frame to be retrieved, and then watch that one. It would be very weird. So what happens with video is that it downloads several seconds of frames, a whole bunch, and then you can see this on YouTube watching videos. When you first open a page with a video, you'll probably see the timeline, the seek bar at the bottom, and then you will see it kind of filling up with gray a little bit, and then it'll stop, actually. And then as you watch the video, the little marker that marks where you are in the video will proceed, and every now and again the gray bit will continue on, and that gray part is the buffer. So it's already downloaded that portion of the video, and that's called the buffer. And when you want to actually watch that portion of the video, when you are viewing and you get to that point, then it just retrieves it from the buffer, and that buffer is generally in RAM, in your system's memory, which is pretty fast. Much faster than getting something from the internet. Same with if you're watching a video just locally that you have saved on your computer. RAM is much faster than the hard drive, so it'll retrieve some portion of the video from the hard drive and put it into RAM, and then it plays from the RAM instead of just continually requesting stuff from the hard drive. There might be some delay and stuttering, so it just takes a whole bunch, dumps it into RAM, and then as you watch the video, it'll access it from the hard drive and put it into RAM in the buffer. In Python, you can interact with buffers in various ways. When you're printing, if you print something and specify an end other than a character return or line feed of some kind, you might not see anything for a while, especially if you have calls to sleep in between printing these things. That's because when you print in Python, stuff that is to be printed is sent to a buffer first, and when the buffer is full or gets to a certain point, like a new line character, it will actually send what's in the buffer to the console and will actually print it. So that's why you have to occasionally, if you're working in this sort of situation, you might want to specify that in Python 3 flush equals true, and that will immediately print whatever is in the buffer and flush it out onto the screen. There's also sys.standardout.flush, but if you're using Python 3, you can just specify flush equals true. Also in Pygame, which is a framework for making games in Python. There's the mixer module for audio. The default buffer is kind of large-ish, generally better for starting music, I think. But if you have, say, sound effects for something, the default buffer is large enough that you get a noticeable delay of maybe half a second before the sound actually happens. So you can specify a smaller buffer. And then instead of letting the buffer fill up and just kind of delay a whole bunch, it will try to play the sound more quickly. So that is a buffer. And what are we doing next time with Django? Django. Writing your first app, part 6. Static files. For small projects, not a big deal. For bigger projects, it says especially those comprised of multiple apps. That's wrong. When you want to say that a big thing has small things in it, you can say that your project comprises multiple apps, or you can say your project is composed of multiple apps. Not both. Both is wrong. You will not find this error on Wikipedia because I think a few years ago, some hardcore Wikipedia editor who knew that this was an error decided that he really hated seeing it all the time. So he made it his mission to eradicate them, and made a whole bunch of edits correcting this error, and then eventually wrote an automated script to lurk and wait for edits to pop up with this error, and then automatically correct them instantly. So now you will not find that error on Wikipedia anymore. It's pretty awesome. So now we're going to next time we will look at the app's look and feel with static file namespacing, change the color of some stuff with CSS files, add a background image. Okay. You should always use relative paths. These are the basics. What's the next thing after that? Customize the admin form. Anyway, I think next time looks pretty short because we're just going to be changing the look and feel of our application with static files like CSS. No problem, random changer. I am glad that helped. So tomorrow I don't know what I'll be doing for a game. Could be Star Trek Online. Doing the little missions to get the reward for T5 rep. There are 9 reputations, and for 6 of them, as soon as you hit tier 5, which is the maximum, you get automatically hailed by a contact, and the contact says, here's a bunch of stuff, congratulations. For the other 3 reputations, that doesn't happen. It says you have a new mission, sort of. So you either have to go to some other system and talk to someone, or go and view some cutscenes, or for one of them, the Romulan one, you have to actually go do another mission on your Romulus. It's kind of annoying. But maybe I'll do that as kind of a guide to how do I get the stuff for the reputation I finished. It's not giving me anything. So maybe I'll do that. Katie Clark asks in chat, speaking of Pygame, will you make any tutorial on Pygame like ever? I have used Pygame before. My chess program uses Pygame for the audio, because Python's built-in Python's audio capabilities are very severely limited. I have a video on WinSound, which only works on Windows. And Pygame is cross-platform, so there's that, but it only really likes OGG files. Technically it works with MP3s, but it's basically not really supported and is liable to break. So use OGG if you're going to use Pygame audio. But I have not created a full game with Pygame. It's totally possible. There's stuff. I don't know if it's I don't really know any full release games that were created with Pygame, or whether it's just we can totally make games with this. Look, here it is. It's totally possible. See? Which is not quite as good as yeah. Might be good for games with some kind of physics. I've done games with physics before in TK Enter. It is vaguely horrifying. Do I have it somewhere? I think it's I think I've put it online in some way. Block. So this is a game with physics. This is the data, the boards, basically this part. But this is something with physics, where you draw a line and then it bounces around. Yeah. But so it's sort of possible in TK Enter. That program mostly works. Sometimes the arrows kind of stretch out and go faster. I don't know why. Something with the scheduling's messed up. But anyway, I'm sure Pygame would be much better suited to that sort of stuff. But I haven't really ever tried to do anything in Pygame. I might. Maybe I'll do that. Django is used in lots of popular websites. Reddit was originally going to be in Django, or originally was in Django already, but it didn't scale quite well enough. Reddit is huge, so they ended up using I think Py2Web, which is a lot lighter. But Pygame, I don't know if there's a lot of commercial stuff. What games are made with Pygame? Pygame. What professional games use Pygame? I don't know. What the heck is this? Frets on Fire? Apparently there's a Guitar Hero clone made in Pygame. That's pretty impressive. Okay. Oh, Galcon 2. Galcon, I've heard of that. I think I have it. Perhaps. One of them at least. Check my library. I have Galcon Fusion and Galcon Legends. So apparently Galcon 2 is made in Pygame. I don't know about the others. But yeah, so there are a few legit games written in Python. I mean, in Pygame. So, it's not super popular. It's more common to have other frameworks, like when I started Googling what games are made with, the first suggestion was Unity, and then Unreal Engine, Java, C++, CryEngine, Unreal Engine 4. Those are basically the real engines that people are gonna use. I don't know how much 3D-ish stuff you can do with Pygame. Because Gotta remember that Python it's fast enough for a lot of things, but if you want to push the limits on what you're doing, it is still slower than other languages like C, C++, for example. So if you want a game with the fanciest possible graphics, Python is not a good choice, even if it was capable of it, because if you had written it in a different language, you can get more performance out of it. So basically, if you're trying for at least 60 frames per second on your game with modern hardware, if you're using a faster language, you're going to be able to get more effects, more stuff happening at those 60 frames a second. And yes, I'm specifying frames per second as something to plan around, rather than put in all the effects and then have the game run at lower frame rates, because frame rate is the one thing that really can't, you can't have a primitive frame rate. It just doesn't work. You can look at the old Mario games in the 80s. Pong, frame rate was fine. Maybe it wasn't 60, could have been 30 or something, but whether the frame rate could have been 30, 30 or 40 years ago. 30 today is, it needs that to be playable. So you design around having a minimum frame rate, and then seeing how many effects you can add. And in a faster language, you're going to be able to do more and still have it run reasonably well. But for some simpler games, I guess, like that Guitar Hero clone, etc., Deus Ex is in Unity, so that's a real engine. Unreal Engine. One of them is probably Unreal Tournament. They keep improving that engine. I've heard sometimes that the Unreal series of games are really only intended to be a showcase of the Unreal engines. But, I mean, they're still good games. They're great. I had good times with Unreal Tournament back in the day in my first programming class. Computer camp with C++, and we would learn that, and in the downtime we would play Unreal Tournament on a LAN. It was pretty cool. Good times. But maybe I'll do some Pygame at some point. I'd like to continue with Django first. I don't know actually how much there is. Is there a table of contents? Not really. Part 1 before move on to the tutorial. It doesn't say how many parts the tutorial has. Okay. Testing, and okay. So maybe I will do Pygame at some point, but don't know when, don't know what I would do. I don't know how advanced the tutorial is, if it's just a few things that some volunteers threw together on their spare time or not. Django is a more serious project, serious topic. It's expected that people will use Django for possibly websites for businesses that are intended to make money. So there's a little more writing on it, I guess, while Pygame is not going to be making necessarily gigantic commercial games, AAA titles. So I don't know how good the Pygame stuff is. Pygame tutorial. Pygame intro. Yeah, it's so there is stuff you can do. Python and gaming, module overview, closing. This isn't actually this is not a tutorial. This is just an article that introduces it. Okay, that doesn't help. Tutorials, Pygame. The official pygame.org website just has a wiki topic of tutorials. A newbie guide to Pygame is very good. Newbie guide. Things I learned. Hints and tips. The Python-y way instead of Pythonic. So, I don't know. General tutorials. Online books. Maybe I'll go through one of these, but I don't know. I actually have GameMaker Pro, and will soon be getting the current Humble Bundle to get a bunch of modules for it. I don't know why, but I want them. So maybe eventually I will look into GameMaker Pro and doing things with GameMaker, which I've heard also is terrible for 3D, but also some commercially produced games with that. So maybe that, I don't know. It uses a proprietary GameMaker language, which is apparently similar to some scripting stuff and maybe JavaScript-ish. I don't know. But I'll have to see what I want to do. First we'll focus on Django and see if we can make a useful site. And it's possible that some of the programs that I've made on stream here can be incorporated as Django apps. And then we can maybe run those programs on the server, and the user can interact with them via the browser. That would be cool. That would be really cool. So anyway, that's today's stream. Tomorrow, game. Day after, more Django. And thank you for the suggestion of Pygame, though. That's a good idea, because it's pretty much the Python gaming framework, game development framework. I'll have to look into that and see what there is. If I see a good tutorial that I think would be helpful, maybe we could do that. And until then, we'll see. So thank you everyone for joining me and watching and hanging out in chat. And I will see you next time. Have a good one.